They had various candidates available, any one of whom would have been acceptable as long as it wasn't Franklin Roosevelt.
Their idea was that if they could string it out through 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 ballots, that they could eventually convince supporters of Roosevelt that he couldn't make it, they should drop their support for him, and they could bring in a candidate acceptable to the Morgans.
To ensure none of the delegates broke for Roosevelt, his opponents created a chaotic atmosphere at the convention. They paid street thugs to come into the convention and boo any time Roosevelt's name was mentioned. They ran the media of the city to be anti-Roosevelt to create a fog of confusion. They even went to the extent of pressuring Roosevelt's delegates to break from him while they ate at restaurants and while going to their hotel rooms in the interim hours of the convention. Indeed, Roosevelt did not get enough on the first ballot, the second, or the third. In each vote he made only small gains. Campaign manager Howe and Roosevelt both knew that if at any point he lost votes, he would be out.
The fourth vote comes up, and Roosevelt's in direct communication with Howe and Farley, and basically their idea is they've got to get it on this roll call.
A mysterious telegram began to circulate at this point of the convention, a telegram intended to disorganize the Roosevelt delegates.
The way out of danger of a deadlock is not only open, but it is attractive. For all through these various delegations, there is an astonishingly strong, though quiet conviction that the party can unite on a man who is stronger than any of the leading contenders. That man is Newton Baker of Ohio.
Roosevelt responded to this effort to demoralize his supporters by sending his own telegram from Hyde Park, New York.
I am in this fight to stay. This is a battle for principle. A clear majority of the convention understands that it is being waged to keep our party as a whole from dictation by a small group representing the interests in the nation which have no place in our party. My friends will not be misled by organized propaganda, by telegraphs now being sent to delegates. Stick to your guns. It is clear that the nation must not and shall not be overridden. Now is the time to make clear that we intend to stand fast and win.
The fight at the convention was not an internal Democratic Party struggle, but a conflict over whether the Lincoln tradition of American politics or the British system of empire would prevail in the world. Franklin Roosevelt knew this to be the issue of the convention. He knew this not as a recent discovery, but something which was fundamental to his thinking throughout his life.
In Roosevelt's case, it was a very explicit sense of history. Now, the earliest I can identify it is this paper that he writes on Hamilton, I think when he's about in his late teens or something like that. You know, it's clear that he does have a sense, like Lincoln, of being a continuation of the American Revolution, that his sense of identity is in the American Revolution. Now, I think it's very interesting, even though this is a very short paper, and obviously it's not a big scholarly exercise, it's more his own sense of who Hamilton was.
George Washington, the first president under the Constitution, made Hamilton Secretary of the Treasury, the greatest of the cabinet offices. As Hamilton had stabilized the problems of state, so now he ordered the finances of the country, and it was his impetus that removed for all time the risk of disintegration of the states. None appreciated this solidarity more than Aaron Burr, who, defeated for the presidency in his race against Jefferson in 1800, largely through the efforts of Hamilton, saw in this greater financial security the banishment of his dream of establishing a Northern Confederacy.
Roosevelt was aware, even in his description of Hamilton, that it was an American system, as he later refers to it, versus the British.
Roosevelt's great-great-grandfather was a close collaborator of Alexander Hamilton, in the creation of the Bank of New York, of some of the strategy around the establishment of the First National Bank. Isaac Roosevelt was a great American patriot of that period. And his portrait hung in the dining room of the Roosevelt family home up in Hyde Park, New York.
So I think he had a very personal connection to the founding fathers, to, in particular, Hamilton, maybe because of his grandfather's ties to this. And it gives you a sense of how somebody lives. Hamilton lived in Roosevelt. And that was his, I think, idea.
In 1920, Franklin Roosevelt, then only 38, had been selected by the Democratic Party as the vice presidential candidate. He stumped the country. Franklin visited 38 states and gave over 1,000 speeches. Franklin's policies were focused on the development of natural resources and improving the working and living conditions of the population. Amidst this momentum, Franklin contracted the life-threatening disease poliomyelitis.
At a critical moment in his political career, he had to drop out of politics and concentrate his every effort on battling a life-threatening disease.
Franklin and his family turned this period of illness and convalescence into a constructive period of his education into all fields.
There are times when I think that Franklin may never have been president if he had not been stricken. You see, he had 1,000 interests. You couldn't pin him down. Then suddenly there he was, flat on his back, with nothing to do but think. He began to read, he began to think, he talked, he gathered people around him. His thoughts expanded, his horizon widened.
He realized even more profoundly that it's the human being's mental capabilities, the human mind, that is who you are, and that's your strength. And if you rely on that, in effect, you can be the President of the United States even though you're crippled. The physical side means nothing.
I saw Roosevelt only once, between 1921 and 1924, and I was instantly struck by his growth. The man emerged completely warm-hearted, with humility of spirit, and with a deeper philosophy. Having been to the depths of trouble, he understood the problems of people in trouble. He was young, he was crippled, he was physically weak, but he had a firmer grip on life and on himself than ever before. He was serious, not playing now. Politics had become important to him as a means to a good life.
Although not yet fully recovered from polio, these conditions led Franklin to run for governor of New York and to address the 1928 Democratic Convention.
Our people must not acquiesce in the easy thought of being mere passengers, so long as the drivers and mechanics do not disturb our comfort. We must be concerned over our destination, not merely satisfied that the passing scenery is pleasant to the eye. We must be interested in whether that national destination be heaven or hell, and not content that the man at the wheel has assured us that we shall find a full bank account and a soft bed. We do not want to change these United States of America into the United States Incorporated, with a limited and self-perpetuating board of directors and no voting power in the common stockholders.
Once elected governor, Franklin began to reverse the ongoing economic disintegration by implementing policies of Social Security, unemployment insurance, major state infrastructure, job creation projects, regulation over utilities, and initial regulation of Wall Street. This prescription set a precedent for policy standards later and drew many protests against him from the Hoover administration.
I think it is time for us Democrats to claim Lincoln as one of our own. The Republican Party has certainly repudiated, first and last, everything that he stood for. Those in charge of the national government believe that individual and collective private action could restore the prosperity, and that the restoration of such prosperity is the sole objective.